Have you ever had a day where everything was technically fine, and something still felt heavy? No clear reason. Nothing serious happened. Things were in place. But you woke up with this feeling that something was off, and spent the whole day trying to figure out what. Sometimes it's a message someone didn't answer the way you expected. Sometimes it's a meeting that didn't go the way you wanted. Sometimes it's just traffic, a long line, someone who said something thoughtless, and it stayed. It stuck. It took up space in your day that you never gave it permission to take. And the most frustrating part isn't what happened. It's that you know it shouldn't be affecting you this much. You know it's too small to justify the weight you're carrying. And knowing that doesn't help at all. If anything, it makes it worse. Because now you feel bad and weak for feeling bad. This has a name. The Greeks called it pathos, the state of being moved by what's outside of you. Of being pulled along by circumstances, by other people's reactions, by chance. Of living in reactive mode, always responding to what the world does, never from a place you chose. And the question a group of philosophers asked themselves over 2,000 years ago was this: what if you could step out of that mode? What if there was a way to live that didn't require everything to go right for you to be okay? Not forced happiness, not motivational speaker positivity, something more solid, more honest, more real than that. They called that state ataraxia, peace without disturbance. And they spent their entire lives trying to understand how to get there. That's what this is about, deepening the wound. Before we talk about the answer, I need to talk about the actual size of the problem. Because most people think the problem is stress. That if work gets better, if the relationship stabilizes, if the bills get paid, peace will show up naturally on the other side. And then work gets better, and a new problem appears. The relationship stabilizes, and a new source of anxiety surfaces. The bills get paid, and you realize the peace you were waiting for wasn't waiting there for you. Marcus Aurelius was the emperor of Rome. He controlled the largest empire the Western world had ever seen. He had absolute power, unlimited wealth, entire armies at his command. And he wrote, in the private journal that was never meant to be published, the one we now call Meditations, he wrote this: you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. A man who had everything wrote that, not as advice for others, as a reminder to himself, because he woke up every single day and had to remember it again. This reveals something fundamental. The problem isn't the number of bad things in your life. The problem is your relationship with the things in your life. Think about it. Two people lose their jobs on the same day. One collapses. The other reorganizes. The event is identical. What's different? Two people are publicly criticized. One spends weeks ruminating. The other listens, takes what's useful, and moves on. Same event. Opposite responses. Stoicism begins with an observation so simple it seems obvious. But it takes years to actually understand. Events have no power over you. Only your interpretation of events does. Epictetus, who was a slave, literally someone else's property, without freedom, without rights, without anything, Epictetus said, men are disturbed not by things, but by the opinions about things. A slave understood this, and wrote one of the most important philosophical works in history from inside that condition. The problem, then, isn't the world out there, it's the world in here. Let's go deeper into Stoicism. Not the LinkedIn motivation version, the real one. Stoicism was founded by Zeno of Citium around 300 BC. The story is almost cinematic. Zeno was a Phoenician merchant who shipwrecked near Athens, lost everything, ended up in a bookshop to get out of the rain, started reading Socrates, and never went back to being a merchant. He stayed in Athens studying philosophy, and then began to teach. He taught while walking on a covered porch, in Greek, stoipoikile, and that's where the name came from. Stoicism, the philosophy of the porch. And what he taught was, in essence, this: there is a fundamental division in your life. On one side, what is up to you. On the other, what is not. And almost all human suffering comes from confusing the two. The Stoics called this the dichotomy of control. And it's the most powerful idea this philosophical tradition has to offer. What is up to you? Your thoughts, your choices, your reactions, your values, the quality of effort you put into things. That's it. Short list. What is not up to you? Everything else. What people think of you, the outcomes of your actions, the weather, the economy, your health, to a point, other people's behavior, the past, long list. And here's the part that stings. Most people spend their entire lives pouring energy into the wrong side of that division, trying to control what can't be controlled, and neglecting the only territory where control is real. Have you ever spent hours replaying what someone might have thought of you? Felt anxious about an outcome that hasn't happened yet and that you can't guarantee? Got angry at traffic, at rain, at Wi-Fi that cut out? The Stoics wouldn't say you're weak. They'd say you're misallocated. Your energy is invested where it doesn't compound. It's like trying to hold wind in your hands. The problem isn't the strength you have, it's the object you chose to grab. Now comes the part people usually misunderstand. When you talk about accepting what you can't control, the immediate reaction is, isn't that resignation? Isn't that giving up? No. And the difference is everything. Resignation says, nothing I do matters, so why try? It's passivity. It's the absence of agency. Stoicism says the opposite. It says, put all your energy into what you can control, the quality of your actions, the integrity of your choices, the attention you bring to what's in your hands, and release the outcome. Not because the outcome doesn't matter, because the outcome isn't yours. Seneca, who was advisor to Emperor Nero, and lived in one of the most dangerous courts in Roman history, wrote in one of his letters, Omnia aliena sunt, tempus tantum nostrum est. Everything is foreign to us, only time is truly ours. Think about what that means. The man closest to absolute power in Rome, saying the only thing we truly possess is the time we have and what we choose to do with it. Not the title, not the reputation, not the money, the time, and the quality of what you put into it. The Stoics practiced an exercise called premeditatio malorum. The premeditation of evils. It sounds dark, and that's exactly why it works. The idea is simple. Before starting your day, you imagine what could go wrong. Not to spiral into panic, to get there first, to realize you would survive it, to remove the power that fear of the future holds over the present. Marcus Aurelius did this every morning. He wrote in the Meditations things like, "Today I will meet ungrateful people, arrogant people, dishonest people, envious people. All of this happens because they don't know the difference between good and evil." And then he went to govern an empire. Not because he was cold, because he had removed the element of surprise from adversity. He already knew it was coming. He had already decided how to respond. Peace wasn't the absence of difficulty. It was the preparation made before it arrived. There's an interesting parallel in places you might not expect. Zuko from Avatar. The Last Airbender spends almost the entire series in exactly this war. The war between what happens to him and who he chooses to become. His anger isn't weakness. It's misdirected energy. The moment he stops fighting his circumstances and starts working with them, that's the moment everything changes. The show doesn't spell it out, but it's Stoicism. Beat by beat. The fiction that lasts, the kind that stays with you, is almost always describing this. The difference between the character who grows and the one who collapses isn't what happens to them. It's what they do with what happens. Now, I need to be honest with you about something. Everything I just told you is true, and you've probably heard versions of it before, and you still woke up yesterday disturbed by something small, and you'll probably wake up tomorrow and get disturbed again. Because Stoicism is not information, it's a practice, and that distinction is the most important one there is. Seneca wrote letters about this for decades. Marcus Aurelius wrote the Meditations not to publish. He wrote them for himself, every morning, as training. Epictetus taught the same ideas every day, repeatedly, to students who kept coming back. Because philosophy that stays in the head changes nothing. Philosophy that moves into behavior changes everything. And the real turn, the moment that hits you not while you're listening to this, but maybe 3 days later when you're stuck in traffic and something small goes wrong, the real turn is realizing you have a choice you didn't know you had. Between the stimulus and the response, there is a space. Tiny at first, almost imperceptible, but it exists. And in that space is your freedom. Viktor Frankl, who survived Auschwitz, who lost absolutely everything it's possible to lose, described that space as the last of human freedoms. Between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Frankl wasn't a Stoic by training. He was a psychiatrist. But he arrived at the same place Epictetus arrived at as a slave. Because the truth about inner freedom doesn't depend on philosophical tradition. It's discovered by any human being who is pushed to the limit and survives. And you don't need Auschwitz. You don't need slavery. You have traffic. You have the difficult boss. You have the message someone didn't return. And each of those small things is practice. An opportunity to find the space between stimulus and response, and, for 1 second, choose who you want to be in that moment. The peace the Stoics are pointing to isn't the absence of storm. It's having built, brick by brick, a part of yourself the storm can't reach. There's an image Marcus Aurelius uses in the Meditations that I can't stop thinking about. He talks about fire. About how fire, when you throw things into it, wood, paper, branches, isn't extinguished by them. It consumes them. It transforms the obstacle into fuel. The fire feeds on its obstacles. He was talking about the character of a human being who has practiced Stoicism long enough. Not someone who never suffers, someone who suffers and uses, who loses and learns, who is opposed and grows, who doesn't need the world to be different to be who they decided to be. You won't wake up tomorrow being that person, or the day after. This takes time. It takes repetition. It takes waking up on a hard day and remembering, even if just for 1 second, that you have a space between what happens and what you do with what happens. But it starts here. It starts with the question the Stoics asked every morning and every night. What was in my control today? And what did I do with it? Not what the world did to you. What you did with what was in your hands. The art of living in peace isn't finding a world without disturbance. It's becoming someone the world cannot disturb. If something in this stayed with you, if anything here named something you already felt but didn't have words for, share it with someone who needs to hear it too. See you in the next one.